All right, well, let us worship. That's the rallying cry of Sean Feucht. He's fed up with the double standard. Officials have ordered churches to close their doors, but they've turned a blind eye as protesters pack the streets. So Sean has toured the nation, hosting his own worship protests, so-called protests. He's stirred up his fair share of controversy along the way, though. And Sean Feucht is joining us right now. Sean, welcome to the 700 Club.
Oh, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Sean, I've been following you on social media and, of course, interviewed you a few times as well. And the crowds that you've been able to gather at these events from places from California to New Orleans to D.C. are massive. I mean, there's such a hunger out there, isn't there, for people that just want to gather and worship the Lord?
Yeah, there really is. I mean, and it's evident, people, I really believe they're not gathering with us for a brand or a band name, or it's not even a concert. People just want to get together. They need hope right now. We're in the midst of such a divisive time. And that's what worship does, getting together and looking on Jesus and singing together and praying. It just fills us with such perspective and hope. People are really needing that right now across America.
But you've taken some flack for hosting these events, these worship events, even from Christians. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, governors, mayors, Christians, friends. I mean, we've gotten it all around. But, I think I look at revival history, or I look even in the Bible, and nothing significant takes place to shift things in a generation without some controversy and pushback. And so, I think maybe my my run to be a conservative in California in Congress, I think maybe that might have prepared me for this season that we're in right now.
Sean, let's talk about that. You ran for Congress. You had never been in politics before. What made you want to do that?
Well, really, I think I've spent so much of my history in the nations. The last 20 years, we've been investing ourselves in some of the hardest and darkest nations in the world. But when the pandemic happened, and especially in America right now, I live in California, and we have some of the craziest laws, some of the most intense regulations. We have crazy things like you have to be 16 years old unless you're with a parent to get your ears pierced. But, the state is funding sex changes, starting at 12 and 13 years old without even telling parents. You see these things happening. You see that, I would have ran just purely on the pro-life issue. I mean, that's something that has just been, a cry and a prayer since I was in high school, actually in Virginia, that God would overturn that death decree in America. So, and I look at now, and I have 4 kids, and I'm deeply concerned about the future in America for my children. And that's really what caused me to want to do that.
Yeah, of course, you did not win, but are you still glad you ran?
I mean, I think it was a good experience. I definitely got to peek behind the veil in politics in California and even in the U.S. And I'll tell you, we're called as believers to be salt and light, and there is not enough believers going into that sphere of influence in the world. And so it emboldened me to start calling other people to do the same.
Sean, you had a Riots to Revival concert in Portland, Oregon, a very liberal stronghold, plus one that drew tens of thousands in Washington, D.C. What are some of the after effects that you're still hearing about from these cities you were in?
Well, what we're really going after, we are believing that there is another Jesus People movement coming to America. And we believe that it's one that's full of revival, that's full of salvations, miracles, signs and wonders. You've probably seen, if you've followed us, we're baptizing hundreds of people in every city we go to. But we've really been targeting these cities that have just come under such crazy unrest. And we've really been going after them. And we believe in the same way that the Lord's called us into nations like Afghanistan and Iraq and North Korea and places like that, that same power and presence of God can shift the cities inside our own nation. So we went into Portland in the middle of the riots. We went into Seattle, actually, to the CHOP autonomous zone. And of course, Washington, D.C., I think was a huge thing for us on the eve of the confirmation of the new Supreme Court justice. We gathered almost 40,000 people, and we just worshiped in the freezing rain. I was so encouraged by the grit in Americans to worship Jesus no matter what. It was amazing.
I have never seen so much prayer, and I know you haven't either, in our nation's capital before an election before. Sean, what's your take on this election right now? Is God speaking to you about, what happened? Do you think it's over?
I think we have to let the process play out. I mean, look, Bush Gore, it went 37 days, I think, after that election. And so I think we let the process play out. But I believe in the meantime that we use this season of where everything can be shaken, will be shaken. And just like we saw in New Orleans this last weekend, preaching the simple gospel in the middle of a season that's divisive, it always works. People were running down to the altar, in Jackson Square to give their life to the Lord. And I feel like we're carrying this word. Now is the time for a great harvest. Even in the midst of all this, even in the midst of the uncertainty, the gospel still thrives.
Sean, you have written a new book called Brazen, and you said you had no idea how timely this message would be. Brazen means bold and unashamed, and I love the photo on the cover. Tell us real quick about that photo and why you wrote this book.
Yeah, that photo is actually outside of Mosul in northern Iraq, and that was a bus that was blown up by ISIS. And we were just driving on the road to another refugee camp, and I saw that bus, and I'm like, we got to go inside that bus. And the guys are like, we don't know if we can. I'm like, no, we should go in there. And at the time, I didn't write the book. I hadn't written the book, but when I was praying about this topic and just, one of my favorite Billy Graham quotes where he says, when a courageous man takes a stand, the spines of everyone else are stiffened. And I really feel like that book, for me, it's been a prophetic precursor to the season that I'm in now, but it shows how we have to have grit, we have to have courage, we have to have boldness and tenacity to go after the things of God, and regardless of the mob that comes against us, or regardless of the pressure politically, or regardless of, what people trolls on social media, like, we have to do what we're called to do in the kingdom. And if we do that, it will encourage everyone else around us to take a stand as well. So that's essentially what the book's about. You guys should get it. I think it's pretty good.
Well, I've got it, and I couldn't put it down last night. It's a fascinating story. Sean's new book is called Brazen. It's available nationwide. You need to get a copy. Sean Feucht, thank you so much for being with us. God bless you.
Thank you, guys. God bless you, too. Thanks for having me on.